Hello and welcome back to Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every Friday to help home buyers build confidence, follow a process and hopefully buy really happy. I'm your host, Chayse Jones, and joining me as he does each and every week, particularly in this buyer series, it's my mate, Sam Hunter. How are you, mate?
Hello, listeners. Hello, Chase. I just want to take a moment. It is tough. I have had to do that intro a few times with some guests that we've recorded over the last couple of weeks, and you don't even look at the words in front of you these days. You just nail it, and I stumble over the word confidence when I read it. So respect for doing it each and every week. Hopefully it's a good way of starting these shows.
Well, listen, it's going to, in a few weeks' time, if you can just get past the intro, I promise you that the actual content, once Sam's behind the lead microphone, is actually rock solid.
Yeah, I'm a better guest than I am host.
Hey, this week is part 6 of our buyer how-to series. Last week we did offers, and that's sort of when the rubber hits the road.
For sure.
It's real serious, and for a lot of people, that's where it gets super terrifying, and that's where we want to sort of give people the tools to make confident decisions and be able to, actually make good on not just looking for a house, but actually buying a house.
For sure. Everybody loves going to open homes until it gets serious. And at that point, that's when the bed is sometimes literally, but most of the time figuratively shat. But it doesn't have to be.
Well, I mean, this part of the buyer series is about auctions.
Yeah.
And this, in talking about like fear-inducing, like this is the one where particularly first-time buyers are just like auction running the other direction. But it doesn't have to be that way.
No. And actually looking back at the statistics of this show since we've been doing it, the first time we started talking about auctions, and then we did another sort of recap ep middle of 2024. They're the two most listened to episodes. And then behind that, the third most listened to now is the episode we did with a very, very good auctioneer. Shout out Justin Nickerson.
JN.
Big fan of the show. So clearly people want to know a little bit more about auctions because they are potentially a necessary evil for some people in securing the home that they want above all others. And they are scary, but they don't need to be as scary. It is just a method of sale. It is just another real estate process. There's just a lot of ambiguity, a lot of confusion, and a lot of bad news stories out there from people who potentially went to an auction not really knowing anything about them or the contracts or deposits payable or what it all actually means. And so the purpose of this 20 minutes is to know that you know what it all means, hopefully, and puts you in a position that at the next property that's going to auction that you want to buy, you buy it, and you buy it really well.
For sure. I think knowledge is power for potential buyers out there. The mystery that surrounds auctions we need to move past that. We need to give
100%.
people all of the right information just to understand what is this process, what do I need to do to prepare for this process, and how can I execute on a strategy to make sure that if this is the right home for me, I'm not running scared. I am going in with confidence and I'm going to buy this property. It wouldn't make any difference if it said it was, for sale or offers over this price or closing this date, or that's our auction date and we're going to go there and we're going to execute and walk away with the keys to this property. Speaking of preparation, probably first and foremost, and for a lot of buyers, this is maybe where things do get a bit tricky, is being able to offer under auction conditions.
For sure.
So when you're offering, when you're bidding at auction and buying under auction conditions, you're buying unconditionally. There's no finance term, there's no building and pest clause, there's no cooling off period. There's often set terms as to what the deposit needs to look like. Understanding all this, moving forward with this in mind is very important.
For sure. And actually, it's important to understand what all that all means if you want to make a pre-auction offer as well. There are a lot of properties that will go to market with an auction date attached to them and then they will sell ahead of that. It would be unusual for them to sell to an offer that wasn't unconditional, that at least didn't match those auction terms and conditions. Maybe it wasn't a 5% deposit, but it certainly would have waived cooling off, waived finance, and ideally waived building and pest as well. Again, it would be unusual for an agent to take that conditional offer, being that the whole purpose of an auction is to get an ironclad contract so that everybody knows they're moving on, whether they're moving out or moving in.
Yeah, and that's right. And that's partially why agents suggest auction. And there are some agents that are straight auction,
Just auction
agents.
For sure.
Because they run a process, whether it be 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where they get as many people, emotionally engaged with this property with the intention that at the end of it, everyone is prepared and ready to offer unconditionally in a transparent, open environment in which you're all, vying to try and be the best price.
For sure. Like, people will rag on auctions till the cows come home, but for a property that is on the market and actively marketed and anybody can go and have a look at it, in my view, it is the fairest way to buy a house. Yes, there are times where the result of an auction may seem ridiculous. Prices have gone nuts, right? But everybody had the opportunity to say no. There wasn't an offer that was 50, 60, 100 grand more than somebody else behind closed doors, and they didn't know that they were that far above the market. It is open, it is transparent, and everyone has the same conditions. For me, that is fair. And our preference, if we can't buy a property where we're having a conversation with an agent and a seller one-on-one, whether it's on the market or off the market, the best way for us to buy property is auction, because it just takes all the bullshit out of it.
Yeah.
And it's just clear for all parties.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, I think maybe that fear surrounding auction should maybe be embraced because of that said transparency.
For sure.
We spoke about gaps and how, on an auction day, you only really have to be $1 more than the lower, the underbidder. In pre-auction offers and where you're getting offers that come through that stop an auction. You get the text being, we've got an offer here and we're going to best and finals tonight.
Yeah.
Typically, that only happens for one of two reasons.
Yeah.
One of those is that there has been absolutely no interest in this property and they know that that's their buyer and they need to sort of get them on paper, under contract, ASAP. Mm-hmm. Obviously, they'll still do the call around, get any other offers into that pool and try and get the best result possible for their vendor. But the other more likely scenario is that the offer that they've received pre-auction is well above the feedback.
Loose.
And potentially the gap between where the feedback is or where their potential other bidders are and where this offer is so substantial that they won't make it up on the day. And therefore they're willing to and very open to selling it a day before, a week before, 2 weeks before the actual auction itself.
An agent's job and the job of an auction is to maximize the sale price. That is the reality of it. It's not to get a certain sale price, and they work both ways. So an auction can do a really good job of getting a lot of buyers in competition under the same level, and they push each other up, perhaps that they wouldn't have done behind the scenes. It can work in the other respect where if a seller wants $2 million for their property and the agent thinks it's probably worth 1.78 to 1.85, well, they don't have to tell the seller that. They can have it on the market for 3 weeks and then an auction can tell them where it is, and then they can lock them in their bedroom on the day and say, hey, this is a pretty good offer. It's unconditional. What do you want to do, right? It's not them telling the sellers they're crazy. It's the market. The other thing that it can do is it can scare people into making silly offers ahead of time, perhaps because they were missing out at a property the weekend before where it probably went for market value, but their emotions are now above the market. They're like, we're not missing again. What have we got to do? That was plan B. Let's pay price A.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. They might have had a bad experience at a previous auction and they're like, let's try not to go to an auction again. Let's offer so well ahead of time that it will stop the auction. Invariably, they might have been better served going to auction again, better prepared and buying it for maybe without the big gap.
And I think that's where, and everyone talks about not spending too long in the market because you kind of miss the market. You might have to pay more than you would have 2 or 3 months ago. But that is where time in market sometimes is your friend. And that's why I think if you look at the people who have the good news story of whether it's just buying a house or buying at auction and they can get it done within a month, they were thumbing their way through realestate.com sold prices and they were going to auctions and just watching for probably 3 or 4 months prior while they were getting prepared. So they understood the context. And if they did then find themselves in a position where they either were bidding or wanted to make a pre-auction offer, they knew what their version of a premium price might be. And you have a crack or you don't. And if you buy it, great. The house is the win. If you don't buy it pre-auction, well, you've kind of set expectations with the agent and the seller of where you will be on the day. Everyone else doesn't matter. You can then make a decision. We're going to talk about auction pricing and preparation, everything in a sec, but you can make a decision about, do you stick to that number? Do you even bid? Does it look like it's going your way? Or was that your shit price? And do you go beyond that on the day if someone else is willing to pay, a couple of grand more? Yeah.
Probably no better time than right now to walk through what we do with our clients. Mm-hmm. And this is a pre-auction meeting, a strategy meeting where we sit down with our buyers and talk through spending limits and strategy.
For sure.
We also talk through registering ahead of time. Nothing more stressful than getting to auction morning or auction afternoon thumbing through your pockets and being like, oh my God, where's my ID? You need your ID to register for an auction. So better to do it ahead of time. Take one thing off your plate so that you can just focus on executing on your strategy on the big day.
We are big. There's no point in hiding your interest at that point in time. Like, it's getting to a pretty pointy end of a campaign for the seller, for the agent, and for you guys. Take as many variables out of play. Particularly, there's a big thing with a lot of Brisbane property at the moment to do big in-room events. So it's not just you and maybe 3 or 4 others registering for that one property. There could be hundreds of people sitting in a room for up to 20, 25 properties in some instances. If it's kicking off at 9 a.m. at the Carlisle Hotel on a Saturday morning, or if it's kicking off at 6 p.m. on a weeknight in an in-rooms at their office or whatever it might be, you don't want to get there at 6 o'clock and be in the line. Like, we went to an in-room auctions event at Mansfield State High School last year.
It was a kilometre long line.
For sure. There would have been 650 people there, all registering for 40-odd auctions, right? And we just walked into the front line, picked up our bidder card and sat down in the second row, right? Behind, weirdly, a seller that we were buying off. So, like, that felt like a bit of a power move, but it was just because we were organised. And, like, we were able to sit there, sip our long blacks, watch everybody file in, kind of figure out who was in the room that we'd seen at open homes, right? And we were just doubling down on organisation and preparation. And we still feel pressure if we go and bid on our client's behalf, but it takes it off us a little bit versus imagine if we got there even early, but we were stuck in the line and it was 20 minutes of just waiting. It's like going to the airport, you're just making sure you've got all the stuff in your pockets. Take that variable out of it. Go to an auction as calm as you can be, because that alone will set you up for success way beyond panicking about where you're going to find a park, getting there, IDing, nervously signing your life away, double checking, is it a 5% deposit? And at that moment, imagine it's Saturday morning, you're going to bid on a property at 8 a.m, you're there at 7:30, you're more caffeinated than you should be, and it's 5% deposit, but you've only got, call it 3%. You're like, can we change that? That's a way better conversation to have on the Wednesday prior than it is on the Saturday morning. And just these little things are things that everybody can do, whether you buy it or not, that make it a better experience.
Yeah, I think I'm going to touch on 2 of those things there. One of those is certainly calm, and calm is your superpower on auction day.
100p.
By preparing well, pre-registering, having courageous conversations with you and your buying partner, your buyer's agent, whatever it may be ahead of time, it means that on the day you're going there to execute on a strategy that you've already agreed on. And it's just the theatre of the day. It doesn't mean anything to you because you are a confident, calm bidder with bottomless pockets as far as the next person needs to know. Obviously, other than that is the contract.
Yeah.
And you spoke there about deposits and things like that. If you think that an auction has to go to the exact script that a contract reads when you've requested one and they've sent you the PDF from the agent, it's not the case. If you need to make an amendment to that contract ahead of time, you do have to ask. It has to be agreed. But if the settlement timeframe doesn't line up with what you can do, ask. I need it to be a 60-day settlement. Is that okay? I only have a $50,000 deposit, not a 5% deposit. Is that okay? Having the conversation in the weeks prior to the auction is important. Don't just discount yourself saying, oh,
We're out.
30-day settlement, we're out. No, you can buy under auction conditions with your agreed contract that you've agreed with the agent and the sellers ahead of time. So keep that in mind, because I reckon that's something a lot of people don't realise.
For sure. And I think, again, when you talk about auction terms and conditions, this is where a good solicitor and a good mortgage broker play a part. Like, get a solicitor to review that auction contract. 9.99999 times out of 10 in Queensland, it's going to be a standard REOQ, Queensland Law Society contract. They're going to review it in less than 10 minutes and they won't charge you for it. And I'll be like, yeah, that's cool. Just know that you are unconditional, right? So if you are the winning bidder on the day, you've bought that property no matter what happens. And there's consequences if for some reason that you can't go, which brings me on to the next conversation you have, which is with your mortgage broker. And you say to your mortgage broker, hey, I know you said we're good to buy up to 1.5. We're going to an auction on the weekend. We want to buy it. Chances are it's going to go to 1.5. Can we bid? And they'll give you the confidence, right? If they've done their homework and you're pre-approved and everything's locked away, they'll give you the confidence to go there and bid hard. Or they'll say to you, I think, guys, with this one, if you were to pay 1.5, our system says it's only worth 1.2. So think about that a little bit, because if it values less than what the contract price is, you might have to tip in more cash to make up the difference. You've got it, go for it. You don't have it, think about your price. Once you've got the contract reviewed and the confidence from the broker, then you can sit down and have what we call an auction strategy meeting. And that is just a courageous and potentially robust, let's use that language, conversation, read argument about price, so that you're having it ideally 3 or 4 days before the auction, not in 30 seconds between bids at an auction. And there's, in most cases anyway, there's probably 3 prices that we encourage our clients to come to terms with. And I would say this is the same exercise to run for everybody who is thinking about bidding at auction today, tomorrow, next weekend, at some point this year. You've got to know what we call your Hawaii price. And that is, you've bought that property so far below what you thought it was worth that you book a holiday to Hawaii to celebrate, right? It's a pipe dream. The reality is not many properties in this market now into the future. Let's hope somebody's listening to this in a few years' time and they're like, wow, Hawaii price, that doesn't exist, right? Even probably in a market that is representative of, let's say, a Sydney or Melbourne market, as we're talking about now, where prices are softer than they have been for a while, there's still not really Hawaii prices being sold. But it's important to know what that price is, just in case it goes your way and you want to know what a win looks like. It also probably informs where you think the first bid might be.
100%.
People have this strange habit of opening the bidding really low, and then somebody else who potentially doesn't know really what their prices are is like, holy shit, that's cheap, I'll bid. And then it just brings momentum into an auction. And momentum in an auction sucks, right? You want to suck the momentum out if you're going to buy that house at auction, and ideally buy it for less than your maximum price. So yeah, starting the bidding at a Hawaii price, in our view at least, maybe not the most successful strategy, and just leads to a snowball of people thinking that they can buy it cheaply, which somehow the price this thing gets beyond them and maybe even you.
The dopamine hits. Everyone's got the bang, bang, bang. They got the paddles up. And yeah, I mean, all that's going to do is, like we speak about with emotions and emotional prices and emotional results potentially, happens because of this sort of like snowballing effect.
For sure.
We don't see a lot of properties selling under auction conditions at the Hawaii price.
Absolutely
we do see them get thrown out there,
but
usually not to much success.
For sure.
Second price that we speak through with clients is market
value. This is the price where you're looking at comparable sales. You're ringing the agents who sold those properties to find out the context behind the sale beyond just a number and a time on market and a date and some photos, right? You're trying to figure out, is that actually comparable beyond the bedrooms and the suburb? Was the campaign comparable? You've been to probably 2 open homes at the very least, hopefully, of the place that you're going to go and bid on. Ask them how many people they had through their open home, how many times the buyer of that property saw it, how many people have you seen that are the same, right? So you can then suddenly start to understand, okay, it's a 4-bedroom house, it's got 2 bathrooms, it's got 2 cars, it's on 607 square meters, it's in Stafford Heights. We probably think it's worth in the mid 1.4s. Realistically, that's what it should be selling for. If it had a pool, maybe it'd be a bit more, who knows? If you know that price is very likely where 2 or 3 people who are bidding, if it's a good home, will all see value, which makes the next price even more important, which is, what is it worth to you? What is your walk away price? And we call it, what is your oh shit price? And that is because you don't want to be driving away after that auction is finished and someone else has bought it, looking at each other in the car going, oh shit, we totally would have paid that. But the moment went beyond you because you hadn't had this tough chat early enough.
Yeah, talking about walk away prices, talking about spending limits, it is about finding the absolute limit, and this is where this exercise comes into play, is that you're going to be writing down a number at the end of this exercise, and that is the number that you have in your pocket, and you're okay with whatever happens on the day,
right up to that number.
Right up to that number, exactly right. If it goes past it, the conversation in the car is, hey, still a win.
For sure.
We went there, we learnt something, and someone else was willing to pay more than our oh shit price, and that's okay. The other side of that coin is, if you're purchasing underneath that price, that's a win.
Absolute win.
Yeah. So the exercise that we run is obviously, Mr. and Mrs. or whoever it may be, write down your respective numbers of what your oh shit price is, and then we push and we prod. Because we want to have the hardest conversation on the Thursday before the Saturday auction. We don't want to have this conversation out on the floor. We don't want to see calculators get pulled out to start punching numbers. You pull a calculator out on auction day, you're already gone. Again, we don't even want to see sideways glances on the day. So let's have these conversations here over the kitchen table, and let's push about, if it was to be $1 more than that? Would you be okay if someone bought it for $1 more than that? Well, if it is, that's your new number. And we keep going and we keep going until we find ourselves at the top number. And then we go back and ask again.
For sure. These are the conversations. We have to preface it where I'm being like, we're going to sound like assholes here. But that this is us doing our job, right? If that is the right house for you and you want to pull out all the stops to get it, then we need to figure out what all those stops look like, because there is nothing worse than driving away from an auction, like knowing you would have paid more, but just not being able to execute on that in the moment because you hadn't done the planning.
And like, I think I mentioned this in last week's pod, there's two ways of answering this question as well. Like if we're talking about, okay, so if your absolute oh shit number is 1.48, if someone was to buy it for 1.481, would you be okay with that? Yes, we'd be fine with that. We'd walk away there. But what if we got a call tonight to say that 1.481 would buy it? Would we buy it? Oh, maybe. Okay, well then maybe that's our new number. There is two ways to look at this, and you need to walk through both of those sort of mental states to understand where you actually are okay with walking away from the property.
For sure.
Once you've got it though, write it down. That sticks in the pocket. That comes with you on Saturday.
And again, I think of all the properties that we've secured at auction, they've always been those sort of one of ones. Like it's the house that comes up once every 3 months. And everyone knows it. And there's all the people who've been in for 6 months, all the people who are new to market, probably people who've been looking longer. They're all like, yes, that's the house. And why they go for such reasonably like premium prices is because they are the 9 out of 10 box ticker, not the 7 out of 10 box ticker. And so if you find a 9 out of 10, you've got to understand that, yes, there's market value. And then there's what's it worth to you. And as you say, too many people pull their phones out and go full calculator couple in the moment, instead of taking some time, preparing really hard. And I know we sound like a broken record. A lot of this stuff we're going to keep talking about because of how important it is. The only reason that we've been successful buying those one of ones, those once in 3-4 month properties, is because of this conversation, right? Because we've taken the time to have it, and we've spent, in some cases, we've spent 2 hours going through prices, and people have just been like, I need a glass of wine. Or people have been like, can you leave? And we've been like, how about we go out on the deck and you guys talk about it, come back, right? It doesn't feel like we're doing our job as buyer's agents, but in this moment, when you find that, you've just got to understand where it is for you guys. And it's way better to argue about it for hours, sometimes even days before the day.
We've had the arguments, we've had the glass of wine, we have been sent out to the deck before, but invariably we've had some fantastic auction results.
And we've bought those properties and everyone's stoked.
Yeah, and that is the most important thing,
100%.
is that the actual day itself should be quite enjoyable. Yes, it is stressful, but we're going there to agree on everything we argued about on Thursday, which is awesome, because a lot of people that you are going to be standing there, with paddles in their hands, haven't had those conversations. They haven't had those arguments. They haven't had to send people out to the deck for some time out.
They argue in the car, right? They get back in the car and they go, I fucking hate auctions.
Let's talk about reserve prices. Okay. What is a reserve price, first and foremost?
It is a somewhat arbitrary number that is required by law to have on the day, and it's the effective basement that a seller will sell for. It can be a number that they've picked out of thin air. It can be a number based on feedback. It can be a number that can change at any point in time. But for an auction to legally commence, there must be a reserve price written on a piece of paper in the auctioneer's hand.
Nice. And that's either done the day before, the morning of.
Yeah, you'll get a text message from a lot of agents that's like, the reserve has been set. The sellers are committed to selling. You must absolutely be there on the day. What that means is the sellers want what they want. If you want to buy it, put your hand up and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people's frustrations around auctions and auction campaigns stems a little bit from this. Not just the arbitrary text message, but it's generally maybe in that final week leading into the auction that they get the call to, garner interest in the property, and it's, hey, a lot of the feedback's been really low. Sellers' expectations are in line with that lower feedback. It is a tool to get more people interested and more people registered, more people potentially emotional about this property, even though that may not be the case.
For sure.
The feedback may not have been low. The feedback probably is around where market value is. Again, it's just take it with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. Do your own research, prepare, and don't just take everything that the agent says as gospel in that week. Every
seller who's ever gone to auction has bit off more than they can chew, according to a real estate agent, and you wouldn't believe how many of them still pass in on the day because despite that story, it didn't meet their expectations.
Okay, we're there on the day. We've pre-registered. We've got our paddle. We've gone and sat in our chair. We've got a walk-away price in our pocket.
Written down.
Auction strategy. Now, knowing how many bidders you're up against is extremely important.
Yep.
That can be a simple question at the registration table. How many people are registered for this lot? It can be counting paddles, whatever it may be. But understanding who your competition is, how many of them there are, super important.
For sure. And so again, another advantage of pre-registering is you don't have to get to the auction half an hour early and be the first person on that piece of paper. You can get there 5 minutes before it kicks off. You can understand where everyone's already standing, and you can go and park up next to the auctioneer so you can watch them all and the auctioneer without having to play sort of tennis with your neck. You can also then ask a question: how many other people are here? Every agent under the sun, every auctioneer under the sun will tell you to open the bidding. We think more people who bid last buy properties than buy first. I think there's varying strategies depending on if there's one or two bidders versus maybe 6+. I think is a pretty banging auction. If you got sort of 15 or more, then there's a high chance that seller had bid off more than they could chew, and the feedback was really low. I think good auctions have about 6 bidders. Good auctions can have 2, but that's usually when they start to feel pretty competitive, and I think everyone knows that they might be onto a premium result. Knowing how many there are can just inform your strategy. We're big believers in, if you know your price, you can put your hand up whenever you want, because you're probably going to end up there or thereabouts. Ideally less, but it will be there or thereabouts, whether you're the buyer or it goes beyond you. So don't read too much into the bidding tips that you get from people who are trying to get you to bid and sell. If it's a property you want to buy and there's a couple other people interested and you've got a bit of leeway in terms of where your oh shit number is and where the bidding is, stick your hand up and have a go. But position yourself so that you can see the auctioneer clearly, they can see you, and ideally you can see everybody else who's having a crack, because if they do pull out their calculator from their phone, or they do start turning their backs to the auctioneer and having a conversation, or they look really nervous when the agent comes over and tries to help them and they're just like, leave us alone. They are all of those things, right? You've probably got them right where you want them.
A sign of weakness, potentially.
They're still thinking about it. They don't have a plan that they're executing on. They're bidding and hoping that nobody else then bids over the top of them.
Yeah. So we've got there early. We've pulled up a pew right next to the auctioneer. Yep. We've said g'day to the auctioneer as well. Always say g'day.
We're here to buy the house.
Yeah, because throughout the auction, perhaps they'll come to you. That's you don't want to see the pace or the tempo of the auction sort of get away from you, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
The auctioneer knows who you are. He will have eyes for you, or she will have eyes for you at all times. We don't necessarily need to open the bidding, but it's detecting said tempo. Like if you are in an auction where it's tit for tat, and the increments are, say, in $50,000 increments, and then as those increments start to shorten, perhaps sometimes that's the time to pounce.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your number in your pocket, you're still within your spending limits, but you're almost sending a message, like a knockout bang, here, back up to a $50,000 increment, to maybe take the wind out of the majority of the room. And it is just that. It's a psychological play to be like, bang, I'm here to buy this. I am the buyer. My pockets are bottomless as far as you're concerned.
And I think most of the time when bidding goes down to that, maybe not so much $5,000 increments, but certainly $1,000, everyone's kind of playing with money they don't know they have yet, and they're hoping that the other side will stop. And there is real power in a knockout bid. And actually, if that is your first bid and you can wait till it's like first call, second call, and then you happen to bid 10 grand more, right? And $10,000 is a lot of money, but apportion that out over 30 years to buy that property, it's not that much. If you just were to go another 1,000, suddenly there's 3 people in it creeping up. But yeah, you do land that psychological blow, and you'll notice. And why you position yourself so you can see everybody else is when you make that bid, don't look at the auctioneer, right? Look at the other bidders, because you'll see like defeat in their eyes. Well, I know we don't mean to sound like assholes when we're having this conversation, but this is the theatre and the reality of auction, and why having a plan and being prepared and knowing your numbers matters so much, because you can act on this and you can just put a knockout bid there. And yeah, whether you have another 100 grand to go or not, it doesn't matter, because you've just done 10 times what they've been doing back and forth for probably 3 or 4 bids. And they're all just like, shit.
Well, in their
Who
eyes...
are they? Where did they come from?
In their eyes, they were seconds away from buying a house.
Yeah.
They're there, like the breath's being held, and like you said, like the auctioneer is not the enemy.
No.
In fact, you're there to work with the auctioneer to get a result. It's potentially the competition. That is your competition. No way, you wouldn't believe it. But yeah, sending that message to them almost that it's like, hey, I'm here now.
For sure.
The actual buyer has entered the arena.
If that is the house for you, you do have to act with a bit of ruthlessness, right? And that delivers really good results. Doesn't make you a dickhead, but it does probably make you a homeowner.
Okay, so sometimes you're the highest bidder, hammer drops, third and final, sold. Other times it's I need to go take direction from my sellers. And actually, pauses do happen.
That pause often happens when a good auction is going full throttle and it's well past reserve, because they don't want everybody to make it feel like it was too easy. They don't want to make them feel like they've all overpaid, so they'll still go on pause. And like we used to, when I was selling houses, I would say to my sellers, I was like, hey, one of two things is going to happen when the auction stops. We're going to pause it regardless, and I'm going to come in here and we're going to high five and talk about the weather. Or I'm going to come in here and we'll have a hard conversation about whether we're selling this to an unconditional offer or otherwise. On a really good campaign, you'd walk in there and you'd be like, geez, it's pretty sunny today, isn't it? And you'd spend 2 or 3 minutes in a bedroom with a closed door just talking about when you were going to pop the champagne and we're going to put the sold sticker up left to right or right to left. That still happens every weekend at auctions, so that everybody has a sense of, okay, we're close. And then it might just kick off again. Yeah, in other instances, if it hasn't quite reached reserve, there's every chance that you get pulled into a bedroom or the living room, and you're in one and the seller's in the other, and we're going to hash it out because you've got the top bid and we want to sell it to you and we're not quite there, but let's figure out what it needs to be. That can be a pretty high pressure environment, a pretty confronting environment if you didn't go in expecting it. And again, broken record, it's why it's so important to know your number. You're not going to go past that number in your pocket just because you're locked in a room and an auctioneer is saying to you, you've got a chance to buy today transparently. If you don't buy it today, it goes behind the scenes, you won't know what anyone else is offering. That's what they'll say to you every single time if you find yourself in this position. If you know your number, it's up to you. You can put your ship price down, try and buy the property. You can put less of that down, try and buy the property. But again, in my view, I'll go into bat for auctioneers here a little bit. I think it is the best time to buy a property. And it is a really good time to negotiate because you have a one-on-one line with the seller there and you guys can come to terms with it. Very rarely will they ever put you together with the seller in a room, but ask, just be like, hey, can we talk about it all together?
That's the thing. At that point when you're in the back room, and I would highly encourage you to go back probably 15 episodes ago when we did have the interview with JN. Awesome. Yeah. Like he is the auctioneer of auctioneers, and he talks about how at that point in time he's there to bridge the gap. You've got a buyer that's obviously come here to buy the property today, and where did you come here to buy this property at? And has the same conversation with the sellers and trying to find a way to marry that up and still buy it under auction conditions, but albeit in the back room. Nothing changes though in terms of, standing your ground, being confident. You're there because you were in the lead position. You are their best buyer that's offering under auction conditions today. Don't do anything silly.
For sure. So if you know your number, you can give them that number. You can give them whatever number you want. Most of the time, those pauses end with an increase. So it comes back outside. You walk out with the auctioneer. The seller stays locked in their own bedroom. And he said, hey, good news is we've had an increase. It's going to 1.47 and we're calling the property on the market. That doesn't mean you've bought it.
No.
You're still the highest bidder. If it does get to that third and final call and the hammer comes down, you will buy it. But it does open the floor up again to anybody else to step in. I would say more than 90% of the time, nobody else does, because mentally they haven't had the conversations that you've just spent 20 minutes having. As far as they were concerned, the auction might have stopped 50 grand earlier. Who knows? And for them to do the maths, pull the calculator out, figure it out in that moment where it's first, second, third call, and it might be 30 seconds between that increased bid announcement, you putting your paddle up and the home being sold, they just can't reconcile whether they'd pay that much money or not because they haven't had the conversation early enough. And most of the time, if you go in the room, agree it, you then end up buying the property.
So it's put yourself in a position to have those conversations or put yourself in a position to just buy it straight under the hammer.
100p.
If none of the above happens, we weren't able to come to a agreed increase that would put the property on the market, property gets passed in.
Yep.
And at that point, negotiations are happening that afternoon into the next day, but it opens...
you and anybody else.
Including those that couldn't offer unconditionally.
For sure.
And, again... another way in which property does get purchased, but it just opens up the door to a whole room of other buyers that potentially weren't there on the day.
And that doesn't mean that property's not worth what that seller may want, right? What someone wasn't prepared to give them that unconditionally on that day at that particular time. Doesn't mean it's not worth it. It doesn't make the campaign a failure. A lot of people think if an auction doesn't sell, it's a failure. It's just part of the process. So many properties often sell for way more than they got on the day because people have the confidence to go, I just want to make sure my bank thinks it's worth it too. Here's my 48-hour finance clause. Here's my 7-day finance clause. I don't think anyone would probably have longer than that, but maybe they would. So yeah, it doesn't mean that, haha, I was right, you were wrong, buyer to seller. It's not worth that. It's just, it is what it is. And there's a very good chance that property sells for what they had in the day or more in the coming days, more likely. Like if you look at clearance rates of properties in Brisbane that are reported on the weekend, that's everything that's sold under the hammer. If you then look at that result again on a Wednesday through the week, the numbers are already higher because those properties have sold after auction and they actually count towards those statistics.
Nice. Well, listen, for all of our listeners out there, for all you buyers, first home buyers, movers, hopefully understanding a little bit more about auctions in general, just the method of sale and what all these terms mean, understanding how to prepare, how to strategize, the tactics that are involved, what could happen on the day, all the variables that can play out in a very high stress environment. Hopefully this is all helpful. And I do, if you've got any questions, please send us a DM. We can link a couple of previous episodes which we've mentioned in the pod today. Hopefully this is just all another way in which you're buying the right property for the right price, no matter what the method of sale is. So onwards to part 7. He's Sam, I'm Chayse. Cue the song.